What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Caswell Customs, and today we're lifting Cody's little brother's truck. So he's got a 2017 Ram 1500, and we have scoured the internet, and one, he's paying us to do this, and two, there's no good videos of this install. The only one I found was about an hour long. So we are installing a Zone 4-inch lift on his truck. As you can see here, he's already got some BFG KO2s on some Vision wheels. So we're going to go ahead and lift it, give him that 4-inch of ground clearance. So let's show you the kit and then get installing. Alright, so right here we've got everything we need to lift the truck. So we've got taller lift knuckles, we got our strut spacers, got our drop brackets, front axle spacer, diff skid plate, tie rods, everything we need, everything for the rear. So this is kind of the more affordable Zone 4-inch lift that doesn't have like extended coils or anything like that, or coilovers in the front. So it's just going to be a strut spacer and a coil puck pretty much to lift the truck. So a little bit more affordable. So let's get throwing this on.
And we'll leave the link for all the products that we're using today in the description below.
Also, along with that, he bought this from Custom Offsets, which we are Custom Offsets ambassadors. So if you're interested in getting this kit, go ahead and use that link in the description. It helps us out if you guys buy the kit from that link and use our code CaswellCustoms at checkout. Sitting about 4 3/4. Four 3/4.
So a lot of people like to just throw the instructions out the window, but for this, we're actually going to use them.
Yep.
And one of the requirements is we got to get pre-installation measurements for each corner.
So looking at 7 inches. And 7 inches. So we got 4 3/4 on the front, 7 inches in the rear. About 2-inch difference. That makes sense because normally you've got that 2-inch rake for the truck. So
hopefully everything's going to level out and look clean.
Alright, so this is roughly what 4 inches is going to look like. We just got it jacked up. We measured it. So obviously the wheel's not sitting exactly where it's gonna, but looks pretty good. Alright, so we got the wheels off, so we're just getting everything prepped. So they want us to start by taking off the sway bar end link, tie rods, and undoing all the rest of the hardware. So obviously eventually we got to get the lower control arm off, the shock off, and get the hub out of the knuckle. So like I said, we're going to get all this disconnected. So brake caliper's coming off, rotor's coming off, tie rod, sway bar end link, and then lower control arm. So we just got the brake caliper and brake caliper bracket off. So now we can go ahead and get the rotor off. These look like they were a 13/16. These were a 13 millimeter. So a little bit of standard, a little bit of metric.
Warm?
No, not too bad. So that's definitely one that you're probably going to have to go get, is a 35 millimeter, because no standard kit is going to sell that. It's going to be a one-off socket you're going to have to get.
Shout out to the stubby fucking DeWalt. I mean, that...
Dude, I love this thing. Like, this thing is phenomenal.
And you won't hear me give DeWalt too much credit.
Too much praise.
As you can see, I'm a pretty red and black fan, but, you know, if it works, it works.
Listen, I play no favorites. I own Milwaukee, I own DeWalt. I've used my dad's Rigid a bunch. I wouldn't buy it.
Whatever's the best, you know?
Yeah. But honestly, the only reason I have this is because of the fact that my parents bought me a set of DeWalts, because my dad always had DeWalts. And I was like, well, I already got the batteries, this is what I'm sticking with.
So what you're saying is
I would have gone Milwaukee, but the decision was made for me. And I'm okay with it. Alright, so we got the tie rod off. We are getting the sway bar end link off. We've got a gear puller on the axle shaft, just kind of pushing it out. It talks about using a pry bar and actually pulling it out of the diff. We're going to try and leave it in here, and we're just going to throw the knuckle and the vise to get the hubs off. Our recommendation is, if you got the money and you got some miles on the truck, just buy new hubs, because they probably need to be potentially replaced at that point, or you could run them for a couple, more 1,000 miles and need to replace them anyways. This truck's only got 60,000 miles, so we're not going to replace the hubs. We're going to actually pull them off the knuckles. But if you got a higher mileage truck, just go ahead and replace your hubs now. So now what we're going to do is start unbolting the knuckle. That way we can swing everything down and away, get it all pulled off, and it'll actually pull the sway bar end link out at the same time. And then, like I said, we'll throw this in the vise and get the hub out of here.
Alright, so we got our tie rod and our sway bars disconnected, and our upper ball joint on the knuckle. So we're just taking off the bottom bolt for the strut. Now everything, the whole assembly is going to lower down. We can get the CV shaft out and continue on.
Yep. And so the one last thing is undo this speed sensor, this ABS sensor, because otherwise it's going to drag. So undo that, pull that out, and then the whole knuckle should be able to fall away with the lower control arm. Her brother, her dad, and the guy she tells you not to worry about.
Bam.
Oh, nice. So we weaseled the axle shaft out, got the knuckle out. All we were able to do is just kind of angle it, pivot everything out. Once like the sway bar end link was off, and then thread the nut on just a little bit on the ball joint and hammered up, and it popped right off. So there's our lower control arm. So we just gotta do the same thing to the other side, and then we have to do some cuts on the frame with the cross members, and then we can start reassembling everything. Alright, so we left the strut hooked up here, because last time we kind of started almost gumming up the threads because it had pressure on the lower control arm, so we left it hooked up, and we're just going to pull it down, all this piece with the control arm, and then we'll pull that bolt out.
All is one assembly.
And get the strut out, that way we don't booger up that thread this time. We're able to fix the other thread just by lubricating it and running it through, but
we got lucky, and that could not be the case on this side.
Yeah, so we just want to avoid damaging it. So unthread it.
More of a two-person job on that, unless you want everything to drop down on you.
Yeah.
But still doable.
So we're not following the instructions identically to what they say, but right now, before we drop the diff, we're going to go ahead and throw the front cross member in, and then we still have to do the cutting part, get the rear in. So we haven't unbolted the rear one, but we're gonna go ahead and pop that in, and then we'll take that one out, cut it. But we want to pop that in so we can jack the front of the truck back up with the right cross member on. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Also, definitely gonna need thread locker for these bolts that hold in those cross members, because they're not nylon nuts or anything like that. Yeah.
So always, especially suspension components, always use some type of Loctite, whether it's blue or red. That's your choice depending on the scenario. In this case, these should never be coming off, so we're using red. And we're also going to use anti-seize, because we live in Michigan, and things start to corrode and become extremely worn.
So we want to make sure the stuff that is maintenance parts that need to come apart aren't going to be seized together, and the stuff that we never want to go anywhere is not going anywhere. Right, so when you're putting this drop bracket in, make sure these plates sit square and snug in here, because this used to be where you had your side-to-side alignment.
So this, you can see on this inside one, it's sitting perfectly inside the alignment bracket, where the outside one is different.
Is not. So that's a mistake we made. We just noticed it, but definitely make sure you've got them slotted in the right spot, because it's meant for this oblong hole where you used to have your alignment adjustment.
Alright, so this torque spec calls for 220 foot-pounds. So just get yourself any type of torque bar. In this case, this one's just a Husky. And you can in my recommendation, you can either do it in increments, so you can break it up in 3 sections. So like 110 foot-pounds, 180 foot-pounds, and your final torque spec is 220. So you do left, right, left, right, left, right. Or in this case, we're just going to go right to 220. Alright, next we got, we're working on the differential and the drive shaft. So anytime you're going to take off a drive line, something that's already used, worn, or broken in, make sure on your flanges you do a marking. Alright, so you can see here on the differential side, I made a small mark, and equal to that on the drive shaft side, you pin a small mark. That way that drive shaft, when it goes back in, is in the same exact position as it has been for the last 60,000, 100,000, 200,000 miles, and you know everything's in the same position. So mark those two on the drive shaft and the differential, and then you got four bolts for the 15 millimeter. Take those out. You might have to tap the drive shaft a couple times. That'll fall off. And then work on the cross member for under the differential, do you remember what size those were?
Those were a 18 millimeter. 18 millimeter on both sides, so the nut and bolt.
So 4 of those, take that out, and now you can start working on getting the differential out.
Over on this side, just hand me the camera. There is the electronic controller for, going in and out of 4-wheel drive. There's this red clip. You have to push that back with like a pick or something, and then right here there is the push button. You push that down, and then you can just slide it right off of there. So that way nothing's hooked up electrically when you drop your diff, and that way you don't break any wires or yank anything, if you forget to unplug that. So we just got our front diff pulled. We got our new brake bracket put in. We did do the recommendation where it says just to unbolt it, cut that part, and extend the hard line. Don't super love it, but we're going to get another bolt to line that up better. But that's in. So now we are in the process of getting ready to cut this part of the frame. It says to measure 1 3/4 inches from the inside of this point to where we need to cut. It's pretty much right through the center of where that hole is, because the drop bracket just bolts in here and on the other side. So you're deleting this cross bracket and just going with the new drop bracket cross member, so these bolt holes are no longer needed. The diff, kind of a pain to get out, but there are
real pain, don't you lie.
It is actually a nightmare, but there's 2 bolts there, there's 3 bolts there, and then there's 2 bolts on the passenger side. It takes a little bit of effort, and you definitely need some flexibility. You need to be limber to get up in there.
A lot of small movements with the breaker bar, the ratchet.
Little strokes. That'll get you there.
Yeah.
So, so we're about to start the cutting process, and then we'll get everything thrown back in. So we got our wheel bearing out of the one knuckle. This was extremely difficult, so we ended up sticking it in the vise and literally taking a chisel or a punch and just kind of slowly weaseling it out from all angles, and then we took our slide hammer and just yanked it out. But this took a lot to get this out, so my recommendation is, if you don't have a slide hammer and you don't have a good vise, buy new hubs, because you're gonna spend an eternity trying to get these out.
You can just see, 60,000 miles, and these things are nasty. Yeah, they might still be tight, but
I mean, this is good old Michigan wear and tear, good old rust belt. So we got them out, but our recommendations, if you have the extra budget for wheel hubs, do it. It's gonna save you so much pain. God, so grody.
God, that's even worse than the other one. Unfortunately, sometimes it's the nature of the beast on getting these out. You booger up the edges of the bearing. So anytime you're going to reinstall them, you want that flat surface again. So just take a file, clean up the surface, make it nice and flat. And then again, anti-seize on the outside surface, anywhere on metal is going to be flush to each other. And then grease up the splines on the inside of the bearing.
Here we've got the completely put together extended knuckle from zone. So hub, brake shield. So got that. Still got more to bolt in over there, but we're getting these together while our paint dries from where we cut the frame. So we are getting the diff tightened in. Do not tighten the upper hardware on either side before you get the diff started into those brackets. Then you can tighten them, because you won't be able to kind of finagle it in. So right now we're just tightening up the rest of the hardware. So that is the bracket for the driver's side. There's two. There's that style, and then we've got this other style for over here.
Alright, so we got getting the lower control arm in on the passenger side. We got everything else on the differential all buttoned up. So now we're starting with the assembly of everything else on the outside. We got our alignment keys in.
So they are just like it's not pentagon. Is that pentagon? Yeah, it's a pentagon
keyed,
shape.
I mean,
so it's shaped like the pentagon. You just gotta match it up.
I mean, you have to take it to an alignment shop anyways, but in order to assemble it, you got to get it, you know, just close as you can.
We don't do alignment, so good enough. So now we can go ahead and get our shock in here, get our knuckle in, and we still got to cut our tie rod in, get our axle shaft in, but we are getting back to assembly. So before we get the knuckle in, we're probably going to want to put the axle shaft on.
And before that, I'd recommend, what do you think, cut the tie rod?
Yeah.
Alright, so for the 4-inch kit, it calls for 5/8 to be cut off of the tie rod. So we're just taking this, we're going to line it up right to 5/8. Take the thin grinder, score a mark, back the nut back off. Now we got a clear mark of where we got to cut.
Yep. Keep the nut on there. That way after you finish your cut and you grind it smooth, it helps feed its new grooves when you take it off. It just makes for a cleaner bolt end.
Alright, tightening up the ball joints. Alright, so we got the upper ball joint tightened down, lower ball joint tightened down on this side. We still got to do the bottom of the strut. We got the top strut tightened up there. And then we, on the other side, tightened up the axle shaft, or the CV shaft nut to 185 foot-pounds. I'll show you how we chucked the other side, and we'll do that on over here.
The big thing with getting the strut in, this is a very interesting position, but the big thing with getting the strut and like everything in is either if two people, so one person can pull up while the other person fastens the nuts, or you're going to need a jack like this. Get a position.
Put some stress on the control arm.
And that way you can start your nuts at the top of the strut, and then you can do the same thing with getting the knuckle into the upper control arm. Best order of operation is going to be get your lower control arm in, then get this somewhat started, your strut, get your bottom bolt into your strut, into the lower control arm, and then kind of get it perched in there. Once you got it there, take your knuckle, go into your bottom ball joint, get a nut on the bottom, then put your axle shaft in, so you're going to angle away, feed your axle shaft in, and then you can go ahead and lift it up or use the jack to put that pressure on like we talked about. Start the nuts at the top of the strut, then once you got that situated, then take your upper ball joint and go into the top of the knuckle. Once again, if you don't have two people, use the jack to lift it up. So that's the best operation or order of operation we found. Worked out pretty good.
Alright, for the axle shaft joint, we just got a pry bar. We put it between the spokes. So when you're going to torque down either side, the opposite side is going to try to spin, right? So we got the pry bar in between the spokes.
So it'll fight the spokes.
Stop that from turning. Then we're going to come over here, take our torque bar, put that to 185 foot-pounds.
Alright, so we are on the point of putting on the wheels. Everything is all bolted up. Minty. Alright Ryan, your squatted truck's all done, so we're looking at 9 3/4.
And we started at 4 3/4?
Yeah, so how are we at 9 3/4?
Not my problem.
Not my problem. Either way, we're lifted. But as you can see, we do not have the rear done, so we're still sitting at 6 3/4 in the rear.
All right. Hope you like your truck, Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan, there you go. It's all set, ready to go. You can look like the
Cali Lean.
Cali Lean. You get somewhat of a pre-runner look to it, but yeah. All in all, not too bad on the front. Definitely is a little bit of a process, but
that I think the differential work was more of a pain in the ass than we believed.
Yeah, dropping the diff was definitely the longest part.
Alright, first step for the rear, once you took the wheels off, is take the shock. So it's going to be a 21 millimeter socket on either side for the nut and the bolt. Take the shock off. Alright, once you get the shock disconnected, next step is disconnecting some emergency brake cable lines, some ABS lines, and the sway bars. You're going to keep the original sway hardware, but disconnect those on either side. Alright, once you get the sway bar links done, they just come out. You gotta save the hardware. Next is the track bar. It's 21 millimeter on the driver's side. Once you get that, you can lower the axle, and then the coils should come right out.
Easy peasy. Don't lower it too much because you do put some pressure on this brake line, but just enough to get those out. That's good right there. Alright. You can go ahead.
So we were so on point.
Over-eager son of a bitch. So we got this relocation bracket in. It only relocates the upper control arm. The lower is not going to go anywhere. So we got the 24 millimeter bolt with the sleeve inside where the old axle used to sit. Now we've got this sitting higher. We've got this bolted here, here, and on the side. And on the other side, you're going to do the same thing, but this hole is actually going to be where your emergency brake cable comes across. So it's a captured nut. Just run right through there. So now we're going to go ahead and throw the springs in with this basically puck spacer on top of them. And then once we get these in, we'll move on to the track bar. Need to shift the top puck over a little bit. But.
Gotcha.
Alright, so we got the spring back in the perch, got the puck up there. So go ahead and jack it back up, and then we just got to do the sway bar.
Alright, so as you guys have been seeing, new sway bars. They come with bushings and new sleeves. So you just take the sleeve, put it in the bushing, Put it in the sway bar end. I'm gonna squirt a little bit of WD-40 or silicone on it. Put it in the vise. Crush it down until the sleeve bottoms out. And once that bottoms out, it has to go a little bit more. And you just give it a little tap. And it'll be coming out perfectly even. So the biggest complaint so far with this kit, I think, would be A, the instructions, and B, the way the hardware has been, what would you say, packaged? Or
Yeah.
I mean, number one, there's a ton of extra hardware. There's extra parts, I don't know. So yeah, it doesn't call for any of this extra stuff from the instructions, number one. The instructions are lacking in information. So if anything, they could improve on that.
Yeah.
But alright, so we got the track bar bracket bolted up. We got the sway bars in. Alright, so here's the stock sway bar that comes with the truck. And now, a little comparison. Thicker, taller, all around better, beefier. Got the shocks bolted up, control arms tightened, and yeah, we're ready to put tires back on.
Alright, so it's the next morning and it's the first snowfall that we've gotten here. As you can see, the truck is covered in snow, but truck is fully lifted, and I gotta say, I really like the way it looks. I think a 6-inch would have been too much for this wheel and tire setup, and we initially thought maybe this wheel and tire, this tire might be too small, but honestly, I think it fits pretty good. So I think 4 inches was definitely perfect, but the kit says you can go up to a 33. These are just under 33s, but all in all, not a bad look. I like it, but definitely takes a little bit of effort with the front end. The rear end, super quick, super easy. So if you're interested in getting this kit, go ahead and use our link down in the description. Go over to Custom Offsets, get a set, or you can go over to TRAILBUILT. We're also ambassadors for them too. So again, I'm Vinny with Caswell Customs. Brent. We'll see you guys in the next one.
It's free real estate.